Hold on to your hats. It's been an absolutely amazing week. An amazing grace sort of week as it seems. More on that in just a minute. But first, it's been a really bad week for racists, hate mongers, religious zealots, and conservative Republicans. On the other hand, it's been a much better week for liberals, those upholding separation of church and state, supporters of marriage equality, those opposed to racism, and liberal Democrats, generally speaking. So, what am I referring to? First up, the Supreme Court of the United States signed into law equality of marriage for same-sex couples with a 5-4 majority vote. Already legal in 30-plus states, the Supreme Court decision now makes it a federal law across the land. Justice Kennedy's majority opinion read, "The history of marriage is one of both continuity and change. Changes such as the decline of arranged marriages and the abandonment of the law of coverture have worked deep transformations in the structure of marriage, affecting aspects of marriage once viewed as essential. These new insights have strengthened, not weakened, the institution. Changed understandings of marriage are characteristic of a nation where new dimensions of freedom become apparent to new generations." Justice Kennedy, one of 5 justices that voted in favor of marriage equality, is a Republican. But as the most liberal of the Republican justices, he has focused his decision, this one and prior ones, usually based on freedoms for the people, including his yes vote for Citizens United, whether we agree with it or not. Several Republican politicians, however, have already come forward to voice their disapproving opinions concerning the court's decision. Prior to the decision, Republican presidential hopefuls Huckabee and Santorum pledged, "We will not honor any decision by the Supreme Court which will force us to violate a clear biblical understanding of marriage as solely the union of one man and one woman." Huckabee also stated, "The Supreme Court cannot overrule God." So it seems they have never really heard of that thing called separation of church and state. And also, Fiorina offered, "All of our efforts should be focused on protecting the religious liberties and freedom of conscience for those Americans that profoundly disagree with today's decision." I don't think the court ruled that heterosexuals now have to marry gays themselves. I could be wrong, but I don't think that was the crux of the decision. Marriage is a civil union under state and federal laws, not a religious ceremony, period. Jeb Bush and Scott Walker had equally unpleasant things to say about the ruling, but today, all people can now get married in the United States. One more brick tossed out of the wall of discrimination. It's been knocked out regardless of where one stands on the issue. In a really bold show of solidarity with the Supreme Court's decision, President Obama called for the White House to be lit up and awash in rainbow colors day and night. Truly amazing, incredible. I'm almost left speechless. Earlier in the week, on Affordable Care Act, another biggie, the Supreme Court also upheld Obama's landmark Affordable Care Act to extend health care to more Americans. Congress passed the Affordable Care Act to improve health insurance markets, not to destroy them. That's what Chief Justice John Roberts Jr. said, and he wrote for a united 6-justice majority. Another blow to conservative Republicans, who had no backup plan anyway, had the Supreme Court ruled in their favor. It's curious, really, that the Supreme Court even looked at this case presented by the Republican Party, but they did. And actually, given that it backfired on those seeking to destroy it, kind of reinforced it. So, anyway, and the story that kicked off this amazing week centers on the tragedy in Charleston. Last week, as you know, 9 churchgoers attending Bible study were gunned down in cold blood in a historically significant African American church by white supremacist Dylann Roof. Last Saturday, a couple of sleuths on the Twitter sphere were able to track down Dylann Roof's website, lastrhodesian.com, which included his recently updated manifesto. In addition to some photos posing with guns, the Confederate flag, and an on-fire American flag. Upon reading the manifesto, you can see a link below if you'd like to read the entire thing. It was clear that his motive in massacring the 9 African American worshipers was racial hatred, even racial terror, as Hillary Clinton stated. And in his hate-spawned manifesto, he outlined the source of his inspiration: the Council of Conservative Citizens, a well-known white supremacist group with a long history and listed as a hate group with the Southern Poverty Law Center. Per their website, the Southern Poverty Law Center monitors hate groups and other extremists throughout the United States and exposes their activities to law enforcement agencies, the media, and the public in general. It's critically important to also highlight the fact that official records show this council has donated tens of thousands of dollars to Republican campaigns, including those of 2016 presidential contenders such as Ted Cruz, Rick Santorum, and Rand Paul. Apparently, these recipients, who had no initial problems in receiving campaign contributions from a white supremacist hate group, are now redirecting the monies to the church in Charleston. Well, that should take care of any conflict of interest for them, right? No problem. In his manifesto, Storm glorifies George Zimmerman's killing of Trayvon Martin as justified and goes on at length promoting the notion of exploding black-on-white crime and that blacks have a greater innate propensity for violence. He laments about white flight, upholds slavery, and asserts lower intelligence of African Americans. And as spokesman for the Council of Conservative Citizens, this group that inspired him, penned a press release stating that while they don't condone any act of violence carried out by Roof, they do agree with his motives for doing so. The closing notes of Roof's hate-filled manifesto, which also targets Jews and Hispanics, read, "I have no choice. I am not in the position to, alone, go into the ghetto and fight. I chose Charleston because it is the most historic city in my state and at one time had the highest ratio of blacks to whites in the country. We have no skinheads, no real KKK, no one doing anything but talking on the internet. Well, someone has to have the bravery to take it to the real world. And I guess that has to be me." As horrible as this tragedy is, it has highlighted more awareness concerning racism, white privilege, and questions around the appropriateness of flying the Confederate flag, an historical emblem tied to slavery and oppression in the South. Since the massacre, Nikki Haley, who is the governor of South Carolina, has called for the flag's removal from the state capitol grounds, and other states have since started following suit. Even Amazon.com and Apple have called for the removal of products and apps that show the Confederate flag. Newspapers from around South Carolina and the region were ablaze with stories on the demise of the flag's furling. But is putting the flag away in museums as a part of history enough to mend race relations and curb racism? Of course not. No. It's only a drop in the bucket. Much more needs to be done to eliminate racism. But furling the flag does help move things in a more positive direction. When asked about South Carolina's decision to remove the Confederate flag from the state capitol grounds, Republican presidential hopeful Mike Huckabee said that, commenting on the flag, that was not a matter that bore whatsoever on a candidate's platform for running for president of the United States. However, in 2008, looking back a little bit, in his run for president then, he told the Republican convention goers that if someone ever told them what to do with the Confederate flag in Arkansas, that they could stick the pole where the sun don't shine. Yep, up their butts. So why did commenting on the Confederate flag have so much bearing then that it warranted comment? But now he claims it's not an issue. Hypocrisy, maybe. Let's not let Governor Haley off the hook so easy either. In 2014, during a gubernatorial debate, when Democratic candidate State Senator Vincent Sheehan called for the state government to no longer display the Confederate flag, Haley responded that voters should not be concerned that the State House flies a Confederate flag because she has gotten no complaints from any of the CEOs that she's talked to during her business calls.
I believe that it's time that we retire the Confederate flag to a place of respect where the history of this great state can be told, and that we all rally together under a flag that unites us all, the American flag, that looks toward the future and not the past. And that's what we need in leaders in South Carolina. We don't need more unethical activity. We don't need more statements we don't trust. We don't need more just looking to the past. We need to look to the future. And that's what this is about. And I'm not afraid to say what I think and to take a stand so that my kids will have a better state than we have today.
Governor?
Thank you. You know, the Confederate flag is a very sensitive issue. And what I can tell you is over the last 3.5 years, I spend a lot of my days on the phones with CEOs and recruiting jobs to this state. I can honestly say I have not had one conversation with a single CEO about the Confederate flag.
And over the years, many groups and individuals have petitioned for its removal. Governor Haley is also a gun production enthusiast, proudly highlighting her state's contribution to firearms manufacturing. You know, that's good. You have to have industry. But it does add a certain light to who she is. Okay, let's move on. On the same day that the Supreme Court called for an end to marriage inequality in America, President Obama gave a eulogy for Reverend and State Senator Clementa Pinckney, who was one of the 9 people gunned down last week by racist terrorist Dylan Roof during Bible study. In his eulogy, the president honored the Reverend's achievements and spoke of the need for much work to be done yet in combating racism and oppression in America. The president caught everyone totally off guard at the end of his eulogy by singing Amazing Grace as the congregation joined in. It was very moving.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now
The White House awash in rainbow colors, and the president singing, "It's been an unparalleled week," for sure. According to a group called New America at newamerica.org, they are an organization that, as they say, is dedicated to the renewal of American politics, prosperity, and purpose in the digital age through big ideas, technological innovation, next generation politics, and creative engagement with broad audiences. Their research shows that since September 11th, 2001, 48 people in the United States have been killed by non-Muslim extremists, compared with 26 by self-proclaimed jihadists. So do we have a greater problem with homegrown extremists than with external ones? When can we talk about racism, heterosexism, sexism, elitism, whatever ism, on and on until we're blue in the face, like we always have. Talk is cheap, as they say. Even President Obama said that we have had enough talk. It's time to take action, to change. But how do we do that? And where does all of this leave us today? If you ask David Niose, who recently wrote an article for Psychology Today titled Anti-Intellectualism is Killing America, the author asserts, many will correctly blame Roof's actions on America's culture of racism and gun violence, but it's time to realize that such phenomena are directly tied to the nation's culture of ignorance. Niose states that America needs to dig deeper than superficially talk about racism and gun control. More needs to be done to eradicate ignorance and rising anti-intellectualism in America by addressing the abandonment of reason and promoting critical thinking. You can read more on this subject in David's latest book, Fighting Back the Right, Reclaiming America from the Attack on Reason. I'd like to close tonight by quoting Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, concerning the importance of looking back and connecting the dots. He said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever." This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life. So, do we have enough dots now looking behind us to clearly and unmistakably see that we as people, as a nation, as citizens, as humans, need to look inside ourselves to find a better path forward? Call it gut, call it reason, call it whatever you like. Each of us will decide upon looking back and connecting the dots how we shall proceed today and into our future. The Supreme Court did their part this week in connecting the dots and ensuring progress. Now it's your and my turn to carry us forward the best way that we can into our future and the next generation's dots. Good night.